Don't you quit on me, sir. Please don't quit on me. Blood ran between his fingers, not his own. Mason Reed was 6 years old, barefoot, 39 pounds, covered in cigarette burns, kneeling on broken glass inside a flipped truck, holding a dying old man's skull together with hands too small to button his own shirt. He'd stolen 2 cans of stew 10 minutes ago. Now he was keeping a stranger alive on a road where nobody was coming. He didn't know this man was the patriarch of the Hells Angels. He didn't know this man's son, the president of the most dangerous motorcycle club in Tennessee, had been searching for him since the day he was born. And he didn't know that he was holding his own grandfather's hand. Subscribe, follow this story to the very end, and comment your city so I can see how far this journey travels. Mason Reed's hands wouldn't stop shaking, not from fear, not from cold, from hunger. The kind of hunger that eats you from the inside, where your body gives up asking and starts feeding on itself, where your fingers twitch and your vision blurs, and you can hear your own heartbeat pounding in your skull because there's nothing left in your stomach to absorb the violence of being alive. He was 6 years old, 39 pounds, dirty blonde hair matted against his forehead, hanging over eyes that were too blue and too old for a boy his age. He wore a flannel shirt 3 sizes too big, sleeves rolled past his elbows, and sneakers he'd pulled from behind a church donation bin. Left shoe had a hole in the toe, his only pair of socks poking through like a dirty white tongue. He hadn't eaten in 2.5 days. The plastic bag in his hand held 2 cans of beef stew and a sleeve of saltine crackers. Stolen. 10 minutes ago from the Piney Hollow Family Dollar, he'd walked in, grabbed them off the shelf, and walked out while the cashier argued with someone about a lottery ticket. Mason didn't feel guilty. Guilt was a luxury for kids who had kitchens. County Road 14 stretched out empty in both directions. August heat pressed down on Hardin County like a furnace lid. No cars, no people, just Mason and cracked asphalt and cicadas screaming from the pine trees and the plastic bag tapping against his bare shin with every step. Then he heard it. Metal shrieking against metal, glass exploding, the wet, heavy crunch of a vehicle leaving the road at speed and slamming into something that wouldn't move. Then silence. The kind of silence that comes after violence, when the whole world holds its breath to see what's still alive. Every instinct in Mason's body, every lesson beaten into him over 6 years of living with Wade Puckett, screamed the same thing. Keep walking. Don't look. Don't stop. Invisible boys survive. Visible boys get burned. He kept walking. 3 steps. 4. 5. Help! The voice was barely a sound, more like a breath that someone had shaped into a word. A man who didn't believe anyone would hear him. Somebody, please. Mason's feet stopped. His brain said run. His body said stay. Something deeper than both, something Wade hadn't been able to burn out of him, said go. He rounded the curve. A faded red Ford pickup lay on its side in the drainage ditch like a gut-shot animal. Steam hissed from the crumpled hood. The windshield was a shattered web of cracks. The driver's side door was crushed flat against the ground. And inside, pinned behind a bent steering column with blood streaming from a deep gash across his temple, was an old man. Silver hair cropped close, weathered face. His left arm bent at an angle that made Mason's stomach flip. His right hand still gripped the steering wheel like he was trying to drive somewhere that mattered. The man's eyes, pale gray, sharp even through the blood and shock, found Mason through the shattered passenger window. Son! The old man's voice was cracked glass. You're just a little boy. Go find somebody. Go find a grown-up. Mason looked up the road. Empty. Looked down the road. Empty. There's nobody else, sir. He dropped the grocery bag. 1 stew can rolled into the ditch, the crackers crushed on the asphalt. I'm coming in. Kid, don't. There's glass everywhere. Mason was already climbing through the passenger window. Glass sliced into his palms, cut through the skin on his knees. Blood came immediately, hot and sharp, but Mason didn't make a sound. Pain was familiar. Pain was the language he spoke most fluently. He'd had cigarette burns held against his wrist until the skin bubbled. He'd had ribs cracked by a man's boot while he curled on a kitchen floor. Glass was nothing. He found a shop rag wadded behind the seat and pressed it against the gash on the old man's temple. Blood soaked through instantly, warm and slick against his small fingers. "Don't move your arms, sir," Mason said. He didn't know where the words came from. Maybe from the night the paramedics came for his mother, and he'd watch from behind the bathroom door, invisible, memorizing everything they did. "I'm going to keep pressure on your head." "How do you know to do that?" "I watched the ambulance people when they came for my mama." The old man's jaw tightened. "Is your mama okay?" "No, sir, she died." Silence. Blood kept flowing between Mason's fingers. "What's your name, kid?" "Mason. Mason Reed." "Don't let me fall asleep, Mason." "I won't, sir. I promise." "What's your name?" "Dwight. Most folks just call me Chief." "Okay, Mr. Chief. I need your phone. Where is it?" "Glove box, maybe." Mason reached with one hand, keeping the other pressed against Dwight's wound. The glove box was jammed. He hit it with the heel of his palm, once, twice, and it popped open. A cell phone with a cracked screen. It lit up. He dialed 911 with fingers slippery with blood. His blood and the old man's blood mixed together. 911, what's your emergency?" "A man crashed his truck on County Road 14 near the Pine Grove past Piney Hollow. He's bleeding real bad from his head and his arms bent wrong. He needs an ambulance." "Okay, honey. How old are you?" 6, but I'm pressing a rag on his cut like the ambulance people do. He's awake, but he keeps trying to close his eyes." The dispatcher's voice changed, routine to urgent in half a second. "You're doing great, sweetheart. Keep that pressure on. Don't let him sleep. Ambulance is 14 minutes out. Can you stay on the line?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm not going anywhere." Mason held the phone between his shoulder and ear. Both hands went back to the wound. His arms shook from the effort. 39 pounds a boy trying to hold a man's life together. "Talk to me, Mr. Chief. Don't close your eyes." "I'm trying, kid." "Try harder. Tell me something. Anything." Dwight almost laughed. It came out as a wet cough. "You're bossy for a 6-year-old. "I'm not bossy. I just don't want you to die." "Why not? You don't even know me." Mason pressed harder on the rag. "I watched my mama die. I sat with her for 5 hours, and I held her hand and she was already cold, and I couldn't do anything. I'm not doing that again. So you keep your eyes open, Mr. Chief. You keep them open." Dwight's hand found Mason's, the small one pressing the rag. His grip was weak but desperate, like a man holding the edge of something he wasn't ready to fall from. "You're brave, Mason." "I'm not brave, sir. I'm just here." "That's the same thing, kid." "No, it's not. Brave people have choices. I just didn't have anywhere else to go." "Where were you headed?" "Home." "Where's home?" Mason didn't answer. Home was a word other people used. Home was Wade's trailer with the meth lab behind the locked door, and the closet where Mason slept on the floor, and the kitchen where the only food was whatever Mason could steal or dig out of trash cans. "Mason," Dwight said. His voice had changed. His gray eyes had locked onto something. Mason followed his gaze and realized his flannel sleeve had ridden up. The inside of his left wrist was exposed. 4 perfect circles burned into the skin, symmetrical, deliberate, the kind of marks that don't come from an accident. Mason jerked his sleeve down. "I burned myself on the stove." Dwight Garrison had spent 50 years around men who lived outside the law. He'd patched knife wounds in motel bathrooms. He'd set broken bones with duct tape and whiskey. He'd seen every kind of damage a human being could take. He knew what cigarette burns looked like, and he knew exactly what a child sounded like when someone had trained him to lie about them. "Okay, son," Dwight whispered. "Okay." But something changed behind those gray eyes. Something old and fierce and dangerous moved into them. Something that had nothing to do with the crash, or the blood, or the broken arm. Something protective. Something that had kept men alive in prisons and ended other men in alleyways. Mason, who did that to you? I told you, the stove. And who put you near that stove? Nobody, I was cooking. You're 6. I cook for myself, Wade doesn't cook. Who's Wade? The wall went up. Mason's eyes went flat. His voice went dead. He's my mama's boyfriend. He takes care of me. Does he? Yes, sir. And the bruises on your other arm? The stove do that too? I fall a lot. Dwight's hand tightened on Mason's. Look at me, son. Mason looked, and Dwight saw it, behind the blue eyes that were too old for that face. A fear so deep it had become architecture. This boy had built his entire existence around not being seen, not being heard, not taking up space. Because space was something Wade punished him for occupying. I'm not going to hurt you, Mason, and I'm not going to let anybody else hurt you either. You can't promise that, sir. You're stuck in a truck with a broken arm. Dwight almost smiled. You'd be surprised what I can do. Minutes dragged. The ambulance was late. Mason kept pressure on the wound, kept talking about the cicadas and how they sounded different in late August than in July. About a 3-legged stray dog behind the Family Dollar who'd let Mason pet him if he sat still long enough. About a book he'd found in a dumpster, about a spider who saved a pig, and how he'd read it 11 times because it was the only book he owned. You like to read? Dwight asked. Yes, sir, more than anything. You learned that in school? I don't go to school. Why not? Wade says school's for suckers. You taught yourself to read? Mama taught me some letters before she died. I figured out the rest from the spider book and cereal boxes and signs on the road. Dwight closed his eyes, not from the injury, from something that hurt worse. Keep your eyes open, Mr. Chief. I know, I'm just thinking about something. Think with your eyes open. 26 minutes, not 14. The dispatcher gave the wrong mile marker. 26 minutes of a 6-year-old boy kneeling on broken glass, holding a stranger's skull together with hands too small to button his own shirt. The paramedics arrived. They cut Dwight free with the jaws of life, stabilized his arm, loaded him onto a stretcher. As they lifted him into the ambulance, Dwight grabbed Mason's blood-soaked hand with a grip that shouldn't have been possible. What's your last name again, son? Reed. Mason Reed. Something moved across Dwight's face. His mouth opened. His lips formed a word. But the morphine was pulling him under, and whatever he'd been about to say dissolved into the fog. The ambulance doors closed. Sirens. Lights painting the pine trees red and white. Mason stood alone on County Road 14. Blood on his hands. Blood on his knees. The grocery bag crushed on the shoulder. Stew cans in the ditch. Crackers ruined. He picked up the one surviving can, held it against his chest, and started walking back toward Wade's trailer. He didn't cry. Mason Reed didn't cry. He'd trained himself not to. Crying was noise, and noise brought Wade the way blood brings coyotes. But something had cracked inside him during those 26 minutes. Something small and buried and almost dead had felt a stranger's hand gripping his and had whispered, maybe. He killed the thought before it could breathe. Hope was the most dangerous thing in the world. Hope got you hurt worse than fists ever could. The trailer waited at the end of a dirt road the county had stopped maintaining years ago. Mason walked in, quiet as smoke. Wade was in the back bedroom, door locked, cooking. Mason went to his corner, behind the broken couch that leaned against the wall, making a triangle of space just big enough for a boy who'd learned to fold himself into nothing. His blanket, his plastic dinosaur missing its tail, and a Polaroid photograph. Crystal Reed at 19, blonde hair, frozen laugh, standing beside a motorcycle with her arm around a man. But the man's face had been ripped away, torn along a jagged line that removed everything above his chest. Just a leather-clad torso and one large hand resting on Crystal's hip. Mason had asked about the man once, one of Crystal's rare, clear days. "Mama, who's the man in the picture?" Crystal had flinched like the question was a slap. "Nobody, baby." "But he's right there next to you." "He's gone, Mason. Don't ask again." "But," I said, "don't ask." Her voice cracked. Not anger, something heavier. Grief so dense it bent her forward. "It's safer if you don't know." 4 months later, Crystal was dead on the kitchen floor. Blue lips, cold skin, needle still in her arm. Mason sat beside her for 5 hours, held her hand, told her about the three-legged dog, told her it was going to be okay. He was 4 years old, and he already knew how to hold someone while they were gone. Now, in his corner, he pressed the Polaroid against his chest. "Mama," he whispered, "I helped a man today. He crashed his truck and I held his hand and he called me brave. I wasn't brave, though. I was just scared he was going to die like you did." The back bedroom door unlocked. Heavy footsteps, unsteady. The chemical stagger Mason knew better than his own heartbeat. He shoved the photo under the blanket, made himself small, made himself invisible. Wade Puckett stumbled into the room, 36, but looked 55. Meth had hollowed him out, sunken cheeks, rotting teeth, eyes darting like trapped rats. "Where the hell were you?" "Getting food." Eyes down, voice flat. Wade saw the single can in Mason's hand. "You stole again? You trying to bring cops to my door?" "Nobody saw me." "You don't know that." Wade snatched the can, Mason's only meal, and hurled it against the wall. It dented the drywall and thudded to the floor. Then he saw the blood, on Mason's shirt, his hands, his knees. "The hell happened to you?" "A man crashed his truck on the road. I helped him. I called 911. The color drained from Wade's face, then came back red, then purple, the color Mason associated with the worst kind of pain. "You called 911. You brought emergency services to this area, with what I got in my back room." "I wasn't here. I was on County Road 14. They didn't come." Wade's hand closed around Mason's throat, lifted him off the ground, slammed him against the wall. Stars exploded behind Mason's eyes. "Did they ask your name?" Just the 911 lady." "Did you tell her where you live?" "No, sir. No, sir, I didn't." Wade held him there. 10 seconds. 15. Mason's vision tunneled. His lungs screamed. His feet kicked against the wall. Then Wade let go. Mason crumpled to the floor, gasping. "Get in the closet." The closet. 4 feet deep, 3 feet wide. No light, no air. The mildew smell and the darkness that Mason associated with being erased. Wade shoved him in, slammed the door, locked it. Total blackness. Mason pressed his face against his knees. His throat burned. His hands, still covered in Dwight's blood, trembled against his shins. "Mama," he whispered, "I'm sorry I helped him." But he wasn't sorry. That was the terrifying thing. For 26 minutes, holding that old man's hand, pressing that rag against his wound, talking about cicadas and stray dogs and a spider who saved a pig, Mason had felt something he couldn't name. Something warm and real and electric, like being a person instead of a ghost. And even locked in this closet, throat bruised, stomach empty, alone in the dark, he wanted to feel it again, even if it cost him everything. 30 miles away at Hardin County Memorial Hospital, Dwight Garrison opened his eyes. His arm was set, his head was stitched, painkillers flooded his veins, but his mind was diamond clear. One thought, one name, burning through the morphine like a flare through fog. Mason Reed, Crystal Reed's boy, blonde hair, blue eyes, cigarette burns on his wrists. A 6-year-old boy who'd climbed through broken glass and held a stranger's skull together because he couldn't stand to watch someone die. Dwight Garrison had not survived 74 years, had not built a chapter, buried friends, done time, and walked through fire, to lie in a hospital bed while a child with his son's eyes went back to a man who burned him. "I need a phone," he told the nurse. "Sir, you need to rest. I need a phone, now." The nurse looked at his face, brought the phone. Dwight dialed the number he'd known for 44 years. It rang twice. "Dad?" Jace's voice was raw, cracked with hours of fear. He'd gotten the call about the crash, had been pacing his farmhouse, fighting every instinct to ride. "Dad, are you?" "I'm fine. Shut up and listen." "Dad!" "Jace Garrison, you shut your mouth and listen to what I'm about to tell you." Silence. "I found him." The silence changed. Empty became full. 6 years of searching. 6 years of dead ends and false leads in 3 a.m. ceilings, and a photograph on a nightstand of a baby he'd held for 3 weeks before Crystal took him and vanished. "What?" Barely a whisper, barely a breath. "A boy saved my life tonight. 6 years old, blonde hair, blue eyes, skinny as a rail and covered in bruises and burns." Dwight's voice broke, cracked right down the center, like a man who'd held himself together for decades, finally letting the fault line open. "His name is Mason Reed, and he's got your eyes, Jace, your exact same eyes." The sound that came through the phone was not a word. It was something from a place so deep it had no name. Between a sob and a roar, between grief and fury, between a man who'd lost everything and a man who'd just found it. "Where is he?" "I don't know exactly. He was walking home. County Road 14 near Piney Hollow." "But Jace," Dwight's voice hardened, "that boy is hurt. Not from helping me. He's hurt in ways that make me sick. Burns on his wrists, bruises everywhere. He flinched every time I moved my hand. Somebody's been destroying that child, and he's been trained to lie about it. I'll kill whoever." "You'll do no such thing. Not yet. You come to the hospital in the morning. Bring Harper. Bring her legal files. Bring your brothers. Every last one of them." "Dad." That boy held my hand for 26 minutes, Jace. He pressed a dirty rag against my head and talked to me about cicadas and stray dogs and a book about a spider who saved a pig. He taught himself to read from a book he found in a dumpster. He's 6 years old and he's the bravest human being I've ever known in my life. Dwight's voice shattered, completely. The patriarch, the chief, the man who'd held a chapter together through decades of war and loss, broke apart on a hospital bed with tears running into the stitches on his temple. "And he's yours. He's your son. And God help anyone who stands between us and bringing that boy home." Jace Garrison hung up the phone and stood in his kitchen with both hands flat on the counter, pressing down so hard the wood groaned. His knuckles were white, his arms shook. Tears ran into his beard and dripped onto the granite, and he didn't wipe them, because wiping them would mean lifting his hands. And if he lifted his hands, he would put them through the wall. His son, alive, 6 years old, covered in burns, holding a stranger's hand on a back road in the dark, because that's who he was, despite everything the world had done to destroy him. Jace's mind went to the photograph on his nightstand. Mason at 3 weeks old, pink, wrinkled, impossibly small. That tiny fist gripping Jace's index finger with a strength that made no sense for something that fragile. Jace had looked down at that grip and thought, "This is it. This is the thing I die for. This is the thing that makes everything else worth surviving." Then Crystal ran, took the baby, vanished into the kind of America that doesn't show up on maps. The meth corridors and backroad trailer parks, and towns where people disappear because nobody's looking for them in the first place. 6 years. Jace had torn apart 3 states, hired private investigators who took his money and found nothing, called in favors from men who owed him blood debts, sat in his truck outside hospitals and schools and shelters in every town Crystal had ever mentioned, watching for a blonde woman with a baby who might have his eyes. Nothing. 6 years of nothing. And now, a phone call from a hospital bed, his father's voice breaking apart like something that had been holding too long, finally letting go. Jace picked up his phone, called Harper first. His sister answered on the second ring. "Jace, it's 2 in the morning. Is Dad?" "Dad's fine, listen to me. He found Mason." Silence. Then a sound that wasn't a word. A gasp that became a cry that became Harper Garrison, 38 years old, attorney, the smartest person Jace had ever known, sobbing into her phone in the dark. Where? How? The boy saved Dad's life, on the road. He's living with a meth cook in Piney Hollow. Harper, he's got burns on his arms, cigarette burns. He's hurt bad. I'm coming, 3 hours. Bring everything, every custody filing, every court document, every piece of paper that proves I've been looking for him. Jace. Harper's voice hardened through the tears. The lawyer was surfacing. Don't do anything stupid before I get there. Don't go to that trailer. Don't touch whoever has him. If you assault someone before I can file, I know. Do you? Because I know you, brother, and I know what you're thinking right now. I'm thinking my son has cigarette burns on his arms, and I've been 30 miles away for God knows how long, and going over there and putting someone in the ground will get Mason taken by the state and you in a cell. So you wait. You hear me? You wait for me. 3 hours, Harper. 2.5. I'm already putting on my shoes. Jace hung up, stared at the phone, then dialed the number that would change everything. Roach. Roach Dillard answered like a man who never fully slept. Talk to me, brother. Church, emergency, every member, now. What happened? My son is alive. Somebody's been hurting him, and I need every Hell's Angel in Tennessee ready to ride by sunrise. Done. Roach didn't ask questions, didn't hesitate. 23 years of riding beside Jace Garrison had taught him one thing. When Jace's voice went that quiet, that flat, that controlled, the world was about to shift on its axis. By 3 a.m., 49 Hells Angels were assembled at the club's farmhouse outside Nashville. 49 men and women in leather and denim and steel-toed boots, standing shoulder to shoulder, coffee cups and cigarettes and faces that said, whatever you need, we're here. Jace stood before them, 6'2", 230 pounds, brown hair going gray at the temples, hands that had rebuilt engines and broken jaws, and held a 3-week-old baby with a tenderness that would have shocked anyone who only knew him by reputation. He was crying, in front of 49 people, and not one of them looked away. Most of you know the story, he said. 6 years ago, my son was taken from me. Crystal ran. I've been looking every day since. He stopped, swallowed. Tonight, my father found him. The room shifted. 49 bodies leaned forward. He's 6 years old. He's living with a meth cook named Wade Puckett in Piney Hollow. He has cigarette burns on his arms. He doesn't go to school. He doesn't own shoes that fit. He taught himself to read from a book he found in a dumpster. Silence. The kind that has teeth. He saved my father's life tonight, climbed into a flipped truck, cut his hands on broken glass, and held my dad's head together for 26 minutes. He's 6 years old and he's braver than any person in this room, including me. Roach spoke first, always did. What do you need? Riders on County Road 14 by dawn. Eyes on Puckett's trailer. Not a move, not a car, not a shadow without us knowing. Harper's coming with legal. FBI already has a file on Puckett's operation. We don't touch him. We don't threaten him. We watch. And if he runs? Jace's eyes went cold. The tears were still there, but behind them, something else. something that had kept men alive in prison yards and ended conversations in bars with a single look. If he runs, we follow, and we don't lose him. What about the boy? The boy is my son, and nobody, not Puckett, not the state, not God himself, is taking him from me again. Roach nodded, turned to the room. You heard the man. Gear up, full chapter. We ride in 1 hour. 49 voices, one word. Family. And 30 miles away, in a closet that smelled like mildew and darkness, Mason Reed pressed his face against his knees and whispered his mother's name into the black. He didn't sleep, couldn't. His throat still burned where Wade's hand had been. His knees throbbed from the glass. His stomach had stopped growling hours ago. It had moved past hunger into the numb quiet of a body conserving what little it had left. He held the Polaroid against his chest, the torn photograph, his mother's smile and the headless man in leather. Mama, he whispered, the man I helped today, Mr. Chief, he looked at my burns and he didn't yell. He didn't tell me to shut up about it. He just got real quiet and real sad, like it hurt him to see them. Silence. The closet breathed around him, dark and close and suffocating. Nobody ever got sad about my burns before, Mama. Not even you. You just cried and said you were sorry, and then you went back to sleep. But he got mad, not at me, at something else, like he wanted to fight the whole world for doing this to me. Mason pressed the photo tighter. Is that what dads do, Mama? Get mad for you instead of at you? No answer. There was never an answer. But Mason kept talking because talking was the only thing that kept the dark from swallowing him whole. Dawn came through the crack under the closet door, a thin line of gray light that meant Wade would be up soon. Mason knew the pattern. After a cook, Wade slept 4 hours, then woke paranoid and twitching. The first hour after waking was the most dangerous. That's when the hitting was worst. Not anger, just the meth-fueled conviction that everything and everyone was a threat. The bedroom door banged open. Wade's footsteps, fast, frantic, nothing like last night's stumble. Something had changed. Mason pressed his ear against the closet door. Wade was on the phone. His voice was high and tight. Yeah, I know they responded to the crash. I know they were on 14. What if they come back? What if that kid told them where we live? A pause. Someone on the other end talking. No, the kid doesn't know anything. He's 6. He's stupid. Another pause. I don't care what Stokes says. I'm not sitting here waiting for... A longer pause. Wade's breathing got faster. Fine, fine. I'll move the product, but I'm taking the kid. I'm not leaving him here to talk. The closet door flew open. Light hit Mason's eyes like a slap. Wade grabbed his arm, the one with the burns, and dragged him out. Get up. We're leaving. Where are we going? Shut up. Wade threw boxes into the truck bed. Mason watched from the passenger seat, legs pulled up to his chest, making himself as small as possible. Wade's hands were shaking. His eyes were everywhere, checking the road, checking the tree line, checking mirrors that only showed empty dirt road behind them. They pulled onto Route 11, heading north. Kentucky. That's where Wade always said he'd go if things went bad. He had a cousin in Whitesburg, a place to disappear. Mason didn't ask questions. Questions got you hit. He sat still and watched the road and thought about Mr. Chief's hand gripping his in the truck. The way the old man's voice had cracked when he said, "You're brave." They passed the County Road 14 junction. Mason's eyes went to the ditch where the truck had been. It was gone. Towed. Just tire marks in the dirt and broken glass catching the early light. Stop looking out the window, Wade said. Mason looked at his lap. If anybody stops us, you don't say a word, not a sound. You understand? Yes, sir. If you open your mouth, I will make last night feel like a vacation. You hear me? Yes, sir. Wade's hands shot out and gripped Mason's jaw, forcing the boy to look at him. Say it again. Yes, sir, I won't talk. Good. Wade let go. Mason's jaw ached. He kept his eyes on his lap and his hands flat on his thighs, and his breathing shallow and silent, the way he'd learned to breathe in the closet, the way prey breathes when the predator is close. They didn't know that 200 yards back, just beyond the curve, a single motorcycle followed with its headlight off. Roach Dillard. Phone pressed to his ear, voice low and steady. "He's running. Route 11 North. Got the boy in the passenger seat." Jace's voice came back like a blade. "Don't lose them." "Brother, I could follow this fool blindfolded. He's swerving all over the road." "How's the boy?" "Can't see much. He's in the passenger seat, sitting real still." "Stay on them. I'm mobilizing." Jace was already on his bike. Behind him, 20 riders pulling onto Route 11 from the farmhouse. Ahead, more emerging from side roads, gas stations, farm tracks. Roach had activated the phone tree at 4 a.m. Every Hell's Angel within 50 miles knew the play. Contain, don't confront, box him in without touching him. Wade checked his mirror and saw the first motorcycle, then a second, then a third. "The hell?" He accelerated. The truck lurched forward. Mason grabbed the dashboard. "Wade, you're going too fast." Wade backhanded him across the face. Open palm, full force. Mason's head cracked against the passenger window. Blood filled his mouth. He'd bitten through his lip. Stars exploded. His vision went white, then red, then back to the blurring road. "I said shut up." Mason spit blood onto his flannel, kept his mouth closed. The taste of copper and fear filled his throat. More motorcycles appeared, behind them, beside them, pulling out from intersections and access roads like they'd been waiting. Because they had been. Wade was unraveling. His hands shook on the wheel. His foot hammered between gas and brake. He tried a left turn. 2 bikes blocked it. Tried a right. 3 more. Tried to reverse. 4 riders sat motionless in the road behind him, engines idling. "Who are these people? Who are they?" Mason didn't answer. Blood dripped from his lip onto his hands. Hands still stained with Dwight's blood from the night before. 2 men's blood on a 6-year-old skin. At the Piney Creek Junction, 16 Hell's Angels blocked the interstate on-ramp. A wall of chrome and leather and faces that didn't blink. Wade slammed the brakes. The truck skidded. Mason's seatbelt locked, the only thing in Wade's truck that had ever protected him. Wade tried every exit, left, right, reverse, bikes everywhere, engines rumbling. No one moved, no one shouted, no one threatened. They just existed, a human net tightening around a man who had spent 14 months hurting a child. The formation guided the truck into the parking lot of an abandoned feed store. Slowly, patiently, like herding an animal into a pen. Wade's truck rolled to a stop. He sat gripping the steering wheel, breathing so fast his chest heaved. His eyes were wild. His meth-rotted mind was calculating exits that didn't exist. 49 riders cut their engines in unison. The silence that followed was louder than any of them had been. Jace dismounted, walked toward the truck. Not fast, not slow. The walk of a man who'd waited 6 years for this moment and would not be rushed through a single second of it. He went to the passenger door first. Not Wade's, his son's. He opened it and saw his boy for the second time in his life. The first time Mason had been 3 weeks old, pink and wrinkled and impossibly tiny, with a grip on Jace's finger that felt like a covenant. Now he was 6, bleeding from his lip, a bruise already forming across his cheekbone where Wade's hand had landed. Eyes starting to swell shut, arms covered in burns and bruises that told a story Jace would spend the rest of his life trying to untell. Mason looked up at him. Blue eyes, Crystal's face, Jace's jaw, terrified. Jace crouched, made himself small, because he understood, in his bones, in the place where fatherhood lived, that to this child big men meant pain. "Hey, buddy," a whisper, gentle enough to hold glass without breaking it. "Remember me? I'm your grandpa's son, The man you saved last night. Mason stared. His lip quivered. Blood and tears mixed on his chin. Mr. Chief's son? That's right. My dad told me what you did, how you held his hand, how you kept him awake. Is he okay? He's okay because of you. Mason's eyes moved past Jace to the 49 riders standing behind him, silent, still, watching. Are they going to hurt me? No one is ever going to hurt you again. You can't promise that. Everybody says that. Nobody means it. Jace reached into his vest pocket, pulled out a photograph, held it in front of Mason's face. The same photo, Crystal and the man beside the motorcycle. But this one was complete, untorn. The man's face was there, young, strong, dark-haired, with the same jaw and the same eyes that Mason saw every time he looked in a cracked mirror. Mason stopped breathing. His gaze went from the photo to Jace's face. Back to the photo, back to Jace. Same jaw, same eyes, same way of standing, rooted, like a man the wind couldn't move. That's you, Mason whispered. You're the man in Mama's picture, the one she tore out. Yeah, buddy, that's me. She ripped your face off the photo. I always wondered who you were. She was trying to protect you. She thought if nobody knew who your father was, nobody could use you to get to me. She couldn't protect me from Wade. Jace's eyes closed. His hands that had done terrible things and beautiful things in equal measure, trembled at his sides. No, he said, she couldn't, and I couldn't either. I wasn't there, Mason, and I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. You didn't know where I was? I looked for you every single day for 6 years. I hired people. I drove to every town your mama ever mentioned. I didn't sleep. I didn't stop. 6 years? That's your whole life, buddy. I was looking for your whole life. Something broke inside Mason Reed. The wall, the one he'd built brick by brick over 6 years of closets and burns and fists and hunger. The wall that had kept him alive by keeping everything else out, cracked from the foundation up. You were looking for me? Every day. Why? Jace's voice gave out. He rebuilt it, word by word. Because you're my son. Mason reached for him, small arms, bruised and burned and shaking, reached for the man in the torn photograph. The faceless ghost his mother had loved and hidden and grieved. Jace caught him, pulled him from the truck, pressed his son against his chest with arms that could have crushed steel, but held this boy like he was made of smoke and might disappear. Mason buried his face in the leather vest. His small hands gripped the back of Jace's jacket so hard his knuckles went white. His body shook, not from cold, not from fear, from something releasing. Something that had been locked in a closet inside him for 6 years, finally kicking the door open. I got you, Jace said. I'm here. I'm right here. Don't let him take me back. Mason's voice was muffled against the leather, broken and desperate, and so small it almost wasn't there. Please, don't let him take me back to the closet. Please, Dad. Please. Dad. The word hit Jace like a bullet. His legs almost gave out. His arms tightened around his son. Tears ran down his face into Mason's matted hair. Never, you hear me? Never again. It's over, buddy. It's done. Behind them, Wade stood between two Hell's Angels, hands shaking, eyes darting, mouth working but no words coming out. He looked at Jace holding Mason, and for the first time, maybe the only time in his wasted life, Wade Puckett understood that he had made an enemy he could not survive. Jace's eyes found him over his son's head. Wet, red, absolutely murderous. You kept my son in a closet. Wade's mouth opened, closed. You burned him with cigarettes. You broke his bones. You starved him. And you locked him in a closet in the dark. I didn't. He's not. You can't prove. My father saw the burns, The paramedics have the call. The 911 tape has his voice. 6 years old, saving a man's life with blood on his hands because that's who he is, despite everything you tried to beat out of him. Roach stepped closer to Wade, not touching, just existing, 6'4", 280, arms like bridge cables, a face that communicated a single, unmistakable message. "He's my kid," Wade stammered. "Crystal gave him to me. I got papers." "Crystal is dead," Jay said, "and you were never his father. You were his prison." Sirens, distant but growing. Someone had called the FBI, Harper probably, already working the phones from her car. Mason lifted his head from Jace's vest, his swollen eye, his split lip, his blood and tear-streaked face looking up at the man he'd spent his whole life not knowing. "Dad?" "Yeah, buddy?" "I knew you were real. Mama said the man in the picture was gone, but I used to hold the photo at night in the closet, and I used to pretend you were coming. I pretended every night." Jace pressed his forehead against his son's, closed his eyes. "I was coming, Mason. Every single night, I was coming. I just didn't know where you were. You found me now. Your grandpa found you." "You found him first." The FBI SUVs pulled into the lot. 2 vehicles, 4 agents. Wade was cuffed, read his rights, loaded into the back seat with the mechanical efficiency of a system finally doing what it should have done 14 months ago. Mason watched from his father's arms, watched Wade disappear behind tinted glass, watched the SUV pull away. "Is he gone?" Mason asked. "He's gone." "Is he coming back?" "Not ever." "Promise?" "I promise on everything I am, buddy. He is never touching you again." Mason laid his head back on Jace's chest. His hand found the edge of the leather vest and held on. His breathing slowed. His body, rigid with survival for 6 years, softened for the first time. Not all the way, not yet, but enough. 49 Hells Angels stood in the parking lot of an abandoned feed store on a Tuesday morning and watched their president hold his son. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Then Roach Dillard, the biggest, hardest, least sentimental man in the entire chapter, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Let's get that boy to his grandpa," he said. "Chief's been making pancakes since 4 a.m. Mason lifted his head. "Pancakes?" "Chocolate chip," Roach said. "From scratch. Your grandpa promised." Mason looked at Jace. "Grandpa makes pancakes?" "Best you'll ever have." "I've never had pancakes." 49 hearts broke at the same time. Not a sound, not a flinch, but every rider in that lot felt it. The quiet devastation of a 6-year-old boy who had never had pancakes, who had never had a bed, who had never had a father or a grandfather or a family or a single adult who chose him. Until now. Jace carried his son to the truck, set him in the passenger seat, buckled him in. "We're going to the hospital to see Grandpa Chief, and he's going to feed you until you can't move, and then we're going to figure out the rest, okay?" "Okay." Mason paused, looked at his hands, still stained with blood. His, Dwight's, Wade's from the split lip. 3 kinds of blood on the hands of a boy who weighed 39 pounds. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "I'm real tired." "I know, buddy. Close your eyes. I'll be right here when you wake up." "You promise?" "I promise." Mason's eyes closed. His hands stayed locked on the edge of Jace's sleeve. Even in sleep, he held on. The grip of a boy who'd spent 6 years reaching for something in the dark, and finally finding it. Jace drove 20 miles to the hospital, 20 miles with his son asleep beside him, holding his sleeve, breathing slow and even for the first time in God knew how long. He drove with one hand on the wheel and the other resting on Mason's knee, light, barely touching, because Jace understood that this boy had been touched by violence for so long that even gentleness might feel like a threat. But Mason didn't flinch. In his sleep, He leaned toward his father's hand instead of away from it. And behind them, 49 motorcycles followed in formation. A wall of chrome and leather and loyalty escorting a boy home for the first time in his life. Mason woke up when the truck stopped. His hand was still locked on Jace's sleeve, his fingers cramped from gripping so hard in his sleep. He blinked, one eye swollen half shut from Wade's backhand, and looked through the windshield at the hospital entrance. Where are we? Hardin County Memorial. Grandpa Chief's inside. Is he still hurt? He's tough, buddy. He's waiting for you. Mason didn't move. His eyes scanned the parking lot, the doors, the exits, the people walking in and out. Calculating, mapping, the way a child maps a room to know where the threats are and where the escape routes lead. Mason, you're safe here. I know. He didn't know, but he'd learned that saying it made adults stop asking. Jace came around, opened the passenger door, and held out his hand, not grabbing, not pulling, just offering, palm up, waiting. Mason stared at the hand, large, calloused, a hand that looked like it could break things but was holding perfectly still, perfectly open, perfectly patient. He took it. They walked through the hospital entrance together, a 6-year-old boy with a split lip and a swollen eye, holding the hand of a man in a leather vest with Hell's Angels stitched across the back. Nurses stared. A security guard stepped forward, then stepped back when he saw the 49 motorcycles pulling into the lot behind them. Dwight's room was on the 2nd floor. Jace carried Mason up the stairs because the boy's legs were shaking too badly to climb. When they reached the door, Jace stopped. Your grandpa's in there. He's been cooking for you all morning. Cooking? He's in the hospital. That didn't stop him. Jace pushed the door open, and there was Dwight Garrison, 74 years old, arm in a sling, stitches across his temple, standing behind a rolling table he'd commandeered from the cafeteria with a griddle plugged into the wall and a stack of chocolate chip pancakes 6 inches high. He'd stolen plates from the cafeteria, plastic forks, a paper napkin folded into a triangle, and in the center of the table, a single daisy in a plastic cup, swiped from the lobby arrangement when the receptionist wasn't looking. Dwight looked up, saw Mason in Jace's arms, and the patriarch of the Tennessee Hell's Angels, the man who'd survived prison riots and knife fights and 50 years of living hard enough to kill most men twice over, pressed his good hand against his mouth and wept. There he is, Dwight whispered. There's my boy. Mason stared at him, then at the pancakes, then back at Dwight. Mr. Chief, you're supposed to be in bed. I made you a promise, son. I don't break promises. Not ever. Sit down and eat. Jace set Mason in the chair. The boy looked at the pancakes the way a person looks at something they've only seen in pictures. Suspicious, wanting, terrified it might be taken away. Go ahead, buddy, Jace said. They're yours. All of them? Every single one. Mason picked up the fork, cut a small triangle, careful, precise like he was diffusing a bomb, lifted it to his mouth, chewed. His eyes went wide, not surprised wide, shattered wide, like something inside him that had been boarded up for years suddenly cracked open and light poured in. These are good, he said. His voice was small and broken. These are real good, Mr. Chief. Dwight, son, or Grandpa, whichever feels right. Mason took another bite, and between the 3rd bite and the 4th, a single tear rolled down his cheek. He wiped it with the back of his hand, fast, ashamed, and kept eating. Nobody told him to stop crying. Nobody punished him for it. Nobody snatched the plate. And that, the simple, devastating absence of violence, made him cry harder. I'm sorry, Mason said, fork still in his hand, tears running into the syrup on his chin. I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm doing this. Dwight reached across the table with his good hand and laid it gently over Mason's. Because nobody ever made you pancakes before, and that's not your fault. That's the world's fault. Eat as many as you want, son. I'll make more. Mason ate 7 pancakes. Dwight made 12 more. Jay sat in the corner watching his son eat a real breakfast for the first time in his life, and every bite felt like a knife twisting in his chest and a prayer being answered at the same time. Dr. Karen Liu arrived at 8:30. She'd been briefed by the ER staff. She'd seen Mason's file, or rather, the absence of one. No medical records, no vaccination history, no pediatric visits. A 6-year-old boy who didn't exist in any system anywhere. Mason, I'm Dr. Liu. I need to check you over, okay? Make sure you're healthy. Mason looked at Jace. Do I have to? She's going to help you, buddy. I'll be right here the whole time. You won't leave? Not for a second. The examination took 45 minutes. Every minute aged Jace Garrison 10 years. Dr. Liu documented everything with the clinical precision of a woman who'd seen abuse before, but had never, in 14 years of practice, seen anything like this. She spoke into her recorder while Mason sat still on the exam table, holding Jace's hand, staring at the wall. 16 cigarette burns across both arms and his torso in various stages of healing. The oldest fully scarred, the newest still raw, in pink. A healed fracture in his left wrist that had never been set by a doctor, knit crooked, permanent damage. 3 cracked ribs, 2 healed, 1 recent. Malnutrition so severe she ordered immediate IV supplements. 39 pounds at 6 years old. He should have weighed at least 48. Mason, Dr. Liu said gently, can you tell me about this scar on your wrist? The bone that healed wrong? I fell. How did you fall? Mason's eyes went to Jace, then to the floor. The wall was going up, the practiced, impenetrable wall that kept him alive. It's okay, buddy, Jace said. You can tell her the truth. Nobody's going to hurt you for it. Wade pushed me off the porch. I landed on my arm. It made a sound like a stick breaking. He said it wasn't broken, and I was being a baby. It hurt for a long time. How long? I don't know, a lot of weeks. I couldn't use it for a while. I learned to eat with my other hand. Dr. Liu looked at Jace. Her eyes said everything her mouth couldn't, not in front of the child. Jace nodded once. He understood. What had been done to his son was not just abuse. It was systematic destruction. Mason, one more question. Have you ever seen a doctor before? No, ma'am. Wade said doctors ask too many questions. Dr. Liu closed her file, turned off her recorder, and for one unguarded moment, her professional mask cracked, and Jay saw something behind it. Rage. Pure, focused, maternal rage. I'll have my full report ready within the hour, she told Jace. Every injury documented, every photograph, every measurement. This report will be admissible in any court in the country, and I will testify personally if it comes to that. Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank your son for surviving long enough to be found. Harper arrived 20 minutes later. She came through the hospital door like a woman who'd driven 160 miles in 2 hours and was ready to go to war. Briefcase in one hand, phone in the other, eyes scanning the room until they landed on Mason. She stopped. The briefcase lowered. The phone went into her pocket. Oh my God, she whispered. He looks just like you. Harper, this is Mason. Mason, this is your Aunt Harper. Mason looked at her with his one good eye. I have an aunt? You have a whole family, sweetheart. You just didn't know about us yet. Mason considered this. Are you nice? Harper laughed, a wet, broken laugh. I try to be. I'm also a lawyer, which means I'm about to make some people very unhappy. Wade's kind of unhappy makes people get hurt. Harper crouched to his level. My kind of unhappy puts people in prison, which is where Wade is going. Mason stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, I like your kind better. Harper set up a command post in the corner of Dwight's room. Laptop open, phone on speaker, files spread across a chair. She'd brought everything, 6 years of custody filings, paternity documentation, Crystal's death certificate, Jace's petition records, 3 separate private investigator reports. "We have a strong case," she said, keeping her voice low while Mason dozed in the hospital bed next to Dwight, who was reading Charlotte's Web aloud with his good hand holding the book. "Paternity is provable. You filed for custody before Crystal even disappeared. You have documented search efforts spanning 6 years. Dr. Liu's report will establish the severity of the abuse. We need to file for emergency temporary custody today." "Then file it." "I already drafted it in the car, but Jace, you need to know something. Wade Puckett didn't end up with Mason by accident. Crystal listed him as the emergency guardian on her lease. When she died, the county social worker placed Mason with Wade as a kinship placement. No background check, no home visit, nothing. That's illegal. That's Hardin County, and it gets worse. I pulled Wade's records this morning. He has 2 prior arrests for possession with intent to distribute. Both charges were dropped. Both times the arresting officer was overruled by the same person." "Who?" "Sheriff Lyle Banning." The name landed like a stone in deep water. Jace knew Banning. Every outlaw in Tennessee knew Banning. A man who wore a badge the way some men wore camouflage, not for service, but for cover. Banning protected Wade? Banning has been protecting every meth operation in Hardin County for at least 5 years. The FBI has a file on him, but they haven't been able to make it stick. Wade's lab is part of a network, production, distribution, and something else. Harper paused. Something the FBI is very interested in. What? I don't know yet. Agent Coulter wouldn't say on the phone, but he used the word trafficking, and he wasn't talking about drugs. Jace's blood went cold. He looked at Mason, asleep in the hospital bed, curled against his grandfather's side. 39 pounds, cigarette burns, a closet. "Harper, what are you saying?" "I'm saying we need federal protection for Mason. Today. Not just custody, federal jurisdiction. Whatever Wade was involved in, it's bigger than a meth lab." The moment shattered at 11:42 a.m. Mason was eating his second plate of pancakes. Dwight had bullied a nurse into bringing more batter, when the sound of car doors slamming echoed from the parking lot. Not 1, not 2, 6. Jace went to the window. 6 sheriff's cruisers, 12 deputies, and Sheriff Lyle Banning himself stepping out of the lead car, straightening his belt, adjusting his hat, moving with the deliberate swagger of a man who'd mistaken authority for power his entire life. "Harper." She was already at the window. "He's here for Mason." "How?" "Court order. He'll have something from a local judge, someone in his pocket. An emergency protective custody order. Standard play. He'll claim the child is in danger from the Hells Angels and needs to be removed to state custody over my dead body." That's exactly what he's hoping you'll say. One wrong move, Jace. One threat. One shove. And he has grounds to arrest you and take Mason. You understand? Jace's hands were shaking, not from fear, from the effort of keeping them at his sides instead of wrapped around a sheriff's neck. Mason doesn't go with him. Mason isn't going anywhere, but we have to be smart. Buy me time. That's all I need. 30 minutes. I have a federal judge in Nashville on standby. If I can get the federal order before Banning can execute his... You've got 30 minutes. Jace turned to Roach, who was already standing. Get everyone inside, now. How many? All of them. Within 4 minutes, 49 Hells Angels filed into the hospital and formed a wall in the corridor outside Dwight's room. Shoulder to shoulder, leather to leather, not blocking legally, just standing, existing, occupying space with the quiet certainty of people who would not be moved. Banning came through the entrance with 4 deputies. He stopped when he saw the corridor. Garrison, Jace stepped forward. Sheriff, I have a court order for the immediate protective custody of Mason Reed, signed by Judge Wilkins 30 minutes ago. The child is to be remanded to state care pending a full custody hearing. Let me see it. Banning held up the paper. Jace took it, read it, handed it to Harper, who was already on her phone, fingers flying. This order is from a county judge, Harper said. It's valid only if there's no superseding federal jurisdiction. I've filed an emergency motion with the Sixth Circuit. You execute this order before the federal court responds, and every action you take becomes contestable. I don't take legal advice from Biker's sisters. You should take legal advice from a graduate of Vanderbilt Law who passed the bar on her first attempt with the highest score in her class. But that's your choice, Sheriff. Banning pushed past her, walked toward the door. Roach Dillard stepped into his path. Not aggressively, not with force. Just stood there. 6'4", 280 pounds, arms folded, face blank. Move, Banning said. Roach didn't move. I said move or I arrest you for obstruction. I'm standing in a hospital hallway, Sheriff. It's a public building. I haven't touched you. I haven't threatened you. I'm just standing here. You're blocking a law enforcement officer. I'm visiting a sick friend. You're the one making demands. Banning's hand went to his radio. I need additional units at Hardin County Memorial. We have a situation. The standoff stretched. 1 minute, 2, 3. The corridor was silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant beep of hospital monitors. 49 riders, 12 deputies, a sheriff with a piece of paper from a corrupt judge. Then Mason appeared in the doorway, syrup on his chin, one eye swollen shut, his small hand gripping the doorframe. Dad, is the policeman going to take me away? The corridor went silent. Every deputy, every rider, every nurse who'd stopped to watch. All eyes on a 6-year-old boy with a split lip and cigarette burns, asking if the police were coming to take him. Jace crouched. Nobody's taking you anywhere, buddy. But Wade said... Mason's voice was trembling. Wade said the police were his friends. He said if I ever told anyone about the closet or the burns, the police would come and bring me right back to him. He said they always bring kids back. The words detonated. Every person in that corridor felt them, not as information, but as impact. A 6-year-old boy had been taught that law enforcement was the enforcement arm of his abuser, that the people who were supposed to protect him were the same people who would deliver him back to his torturer. Deputy Sam Gentry stood at the back of Banning's formation. 26 years old, 3 years on the force. He joined because his father had been a cop, because he believed the badge meant something. He unclipped it from his chest. Sheriff. His voice was steady, quiet, the kind of quiet that takes more courage than shouting. I signed up to protect people, not to hand children back to the men who hurt them. Gentry, you clip that badge back on right now. No, sir. Gentry held the badge in his open palm. That boy just told us that police bring him back to his abuser. If that's true, and I'm looking at a child with cigarette burns and a black eye, so I believe it's true, then I'm not wearing this badge today. Banning's face went red. You're done, you hear me? You are finished in law enforcement. Maybe, but I'll sleep tonight. Deputy Anna Reyes stepped forward. 29, former military, the only deputy in Hardin County who'd filed complaints about Banning's conduct, complaints that had disappeared. Sheriff, I need to say something. Stand down, Reyes. That boy just told a corridor full of witnesses that police return him to his abuser. If we force entry past these people and physically remove this child, and the FBI finds out, and they will find out, every one of us goes down. Not just you, all of us, will be accessories to obstruction of a federal investigation, violation of a minor's civil rights, and whatever else the U.S. Attorney decides to throw. You don't know there's a federal investigation. Sheriff, Reyes's voice dropped. Everyone in this county knows there's a federal investigation. The only question is whether you're a witness or a defendant. Banning looked at the wall of bikers, looked at his crumbling formation, Gentry holding his badge in his palm, Reyes staring him down, Three other deputies suddenly finding the floor very interesting. Looked at Mason in the doorway, syrup on his chin, one eye swollen shut, holding the doorframe like it was the edge of a cliff. He turned and walked away. Didn't say a word, just turned and walked back through the corridor, through the entrance, past his cruisers, and drove away. Harper's phone rang. She answered, listened, hung up. Federal order is granted. Emergency federal jurisdiction over Mason Reed, effective immediately. No state or county authority can remove him pending the federal investigation. Jace exhaled. His whole body sagged against the wall. We're not done, Harper said. This bought us time. But Victor Stokes, the man behind Wade's operation, he's going to come at us with everything he has. Money, lawyers, connections. He'll try to get Mason into state custody through the courts because that's the only way to control what Mason might testify about. What does Mason know? I don't know yet, but the FBI thinks Wade's trailer was more than a meth lab, and whatever Mason saw or heard in that trailer might be the key to bringing down the entire network. Inside the room, Dwight was reading Charlotte's Web. Mason was pressed against his grandfather's side, his head on Dwight's shoulder, his eyes closed. He wasn't asleep, he was listening, hearing a story read aloud by someone who wasn't going to hurt him, feeling the warmth of a body that wasn't a threat. Grandpa, Chief? Yeah, son. Are the police gone? They're gone. Are they coming back? They might, but you've got 49 people in that hallway who won't let them touch you, and your daddy, and your aunt, and me. That's a lot of people. That's family, Mason. That's what family does. Mason was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that stopped Dwight's heart. Mr. Chief, Grandpa, at Wade's house sometimes people came at night, in vans. Wade made me stay in the closet and not make any sounds. But I could hear through the door. I could hear kids, other kids, crying. Dwight's hand tightened on the book. He didn't breathe. There were other kids at Wade's house? Not always, sometimes. They came in the vans and they left in the vans. Wade said if I ever told anyone about the vans, he'd kill me. He said nobody would believe me anyway because I was just trash. You're not trash, Mason. I know, but the other kids, where did they go, Grandpa? The ones in the vans. Are they okay? Dwight couldn't speak. His throat had closed. His good hands shook so badly the book fell onto the blanket. He pressed the call button. When the nurse came, he said one word. Jace. Jace was there in 30 seconds. Harper right behind him. Tell your daddy what you just told me, son, Dwight said. Every word. It's important. Mason told them. The vans, the crying children, the men who came with Wade in the dark, the closet where Mason hid, pressing his hands over his ears, trying not to hear. Harper was already dialing. Agent Coulter, this is Harper Garrison. I need you at Hardin County Memorial, now. The child has information about the trafficking operation. He's a material witness. She hung up, looked at Jace. Her face was white. This isn't just a custody case anymore. Mason wasn't just abused, he was kept. Wade kept him as cover. A child in the house makes it look like a family home, not a transit point. And the things Mason heard and saw could be the missing piece of the FBI's case against Victor Stokes. Jace sank into the chair beside his son's bed. He took Mason's hand, the small one, the one with cigarette burns and a crooked wrist, held it like it was the only real thing in the world. Mason, yeah, Dad? You're the bravest person I know, and I'm going to keep you safe, but some people are going to want to talk to you about what you heard at Wade's house. Important people. They want to help the other kids. The kids in the vans? Yeah, buddy, the kids in the vans. Will talking help them? It might. Then I'll talk, Mason's jaw set. His blue eyes, one swollen, one clear, looked up at his father with something that wasn't fear. It was the same thing Dwight had seen on County Road 14 when a barefoot boy climbed through broken glass to hold a stranger's hand. Courage, the kind that doesn't come from having no fear, the kind that comes from being afraid of everything and choosing to act anyway. I'll talk, Dad, because somebody should have talked for me, and nobody did. Jace pressed his son's hand against his own forehead, closed his eyes, let the tears fall where they fell. And in a penthouse office in Nashville, Victor Stokes picked up his phone, dialed his attorney, and said 4 words that would set the next 24 hours on fire. Get me that boy. Victor Stokes moved fast. By 9 the next morning, 3 attorneys had filed an emergency injunction in Nashville Family Court, a 60-page motion arguing that Jace Garrison was an unfit felon, that the Hells Angels were a criminal organization, and that Mason Reed should be immediately remanded to state custody pending a full hearing. Behind the legal language was a simple calculation. Mason in state custody meant Mason accessible. Mason accessible meant Mason silenced. And Mason silenced meant Victor Stokes' 47-count federal indictment stayed sealed in a filing cabinet instead of exploding across every courtroom in Tennessee. Harper read the motion at 6 a.m. in Dwight's hospital room while Mason slept curled against his grandfather's side, and Jace paced the hallway like a caged animal. "They're good," Harper said. "Stokes hired Philip Crane, silver-haired, 62, best family law attorney money can buy. He's going to paint you as a violent felon who kidnapped a child from his legal guardian. Wade was cooking meth and burning my son with cigarettes. And Crane will argue that's irrelevant to your fitness as a parent. He'll focus on your record, your assault convictions, your association with the club. He'll make the courtroom forget about Mason's bruises and remember your mugshot. So what do? We tell the truth, all of it, your record, your search, your life. We don't hide anything because Crane will find it anyway. And we put Mason's story front and center. Dr. Liu's medical report, Dr. Whitfield's psychological evaluation, and Agent Coulter's federal testimony. And if that's not enough," Harper looked at him, "it has to be enough, because if Mason goes into state custody, Stokes will have him transferred to a facility where nobody asks questions and witnesses disappear. This isn't just custody, Jace. This is survival." The hearing was set for 2 p.m. Judge Catherine Harlow, Nashville Courthouse. Harlow had a reputation, fair, sharp, impossible to intimidate. She'd sent senators' children to juvenile detention and awarded custody to single fathers over wealthy mothers when the evidence demanded it. She didn't care about money or power or reputation. She cared about children. Harper had requested Harlow specifically. It was the smartest move she'd ever made. Mason didn't want to leave Dwight. He clung to his grandfather's good hand with both of his and shook his head. "I don't want to go to a courthouse. Courthouses are where they take kids away." "This courthouse is where we keep you," Dwight said. "Your Aunt Harper is the smartest person I've ever met, and I've met a lot of people. She's going to fight for you." "What if she loses?" "She won't." "But what if she does?" Dwight leaned close, his gray eyes, the same ones that had found Mason through a shattered windshield on County Road 14, locked onto his grandsons. "Then your daddy and I, and 49 of the most stubborn people in Tennessee, will find another way. And another way after that. And another way after that. Until you're home. Do you understand me, Mason? We don't quit. That's not what this family does." "I don't know how to be in a family." "Neither did I at first. You learn, and we'll teach you." Mason let go of Dwight's hand, slowly, finger by finger. Then he straightened up and wiped his face with the back of his wrist, the one with the cigarette burns, and nodded. "Okay, Grandpa, I'll go. That's my boy." The Nashville courthouse was chaos. Reporters had gotten wind of the case. A Hells Angels custody battle wasn't something that stayed quiet. Camera crews lined the steps. Journalists shouted questions. Flashbulbs popped. Mason walked between Jace and Harper, holding his father's hand, his eyes fixed on the ground. He was wearing clean clothes Harper had bought that morning. A blue button-down shirt that actually fit, khaki pants, sneakers with both laces tied. He looked like a different child, except for the bruise on his cheekbone and the swollen eye that was slowly turning from purple to yellow-green. Inside the courtroom, Philip Crane sat at the plaintiff's table with two associates in a stack of files 6 inches thick. Silver hair, navy suit, the kind of confidence that came from winning cases for people who could afford to buy the truth. Harper sat opposite with a single briefcase. No associates, no stack of files, just her laptop, her phone, Dr. Liu's medical report, and the quiet fury of a woman who'd spent 2.5 hours driving through the night to save her nephew. Judge Harlow entered. The room stood. She sat. The room sat. She opened the file, read for 45 seconds, looked up. Mr. Crane, you've filed an emergency injunction seeking immediate state custody of Mason Reed on the grounds that his biological father is unfit. Summarize your argument. Crane stood. Your Honor, Jace Garrison is a convicted felon with 2 assault charges and documented ties to the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, a known criminal organization. He has no established relationship with the minor. He forcibly removed the child from his legal guardian through intimidation, using members of his motorcycle gang to surround and threaten the guardian on a public road. This child needs the protection of the state, not the custody of a violent offender. Ms. Garrison, response. Harper stood. Your Honor, Jace Garrison is Mason Reed's biological father, confirmed by paternity documentation filed 6 years ago in this very courthouse. He filed for custody before the child's mother disappeared and has maintained active search efforts for 6 years, documented in 3 private investigator reports, 47 filed motions, and over 200 contacts with law enforcement agencies across 3 states. The child's so-called legal guardian, Wade Puckett, is currently in federal custody for methamphetamine production and is under investigation for conspiracy to traffic minors. The state system that Mr. Crane wants to return this child to is the same system that placed a 6-year-old boy in the home of a meth cook without a background check. I have the medical evidence to prove what happened next. Presented. Dr. Karen Liu took the stand. She testified for 22 minutes. Every word was a hammer blow. 16 cigarette burns. A fractured wrist that healed crooked because no one took him to a doctor. 3 cracked ribs. Malnutrition so severe his organs were showing early signs of damage. 39 pounds. 0 medical records. 0 vaccinations. 0 evidence that any adult in Mason's life had ever taken him to a physician for any reason. She showed the photographs. The courtroom went silent. Crane's associates stopped writing. Even Crane himself, a man who'd built a career on composure, looked at the images of a 6-year-old's burned and bruised body and had to look away. In your professional opinion, Dr. Liu, Harper said, is this pattern of injury consistent with accidental harm? No, this is systematic, prolonged, deliberate abuse. The symmetry and placement of the cigarette burns indicates they were inflicted intentionally. The pattern is consistent with a right-handed adult restraining the child's arm and applying a lit cigarette to the inner wrist. The fracture was a torsional break, the kind that results from an arm being twisted or pulled, not from a fall. This child has been tortured. Crane objected. Your Honor, the severity of the previous guardian's treatment does not establish the petitioner's fitness as a parent. I'll decide what establishes what in my courtroom, Mr. Crane. Continue, Ms. Garrison. Dr. Paul Whitfield testified next. Child trauma psychologist, 20 years of experience. He'd evaluated Mason the previous afternoon in a session that lasted 90 minutes. Mason presents with complex PTSD, hypervigilance, and attachment disruption consistent with prolonged abuse and neglect. However, he also presents with a remarkable capacity for empathy and connection that is unusual in children with his level of trauma. When I asked him to draw his family, he drew 4 figures: himself, his father Jace, his grandfather Dwight, and his mother Crystal, who he placed above the others with wings. Was Wade Puckett in the drawing? No, not in any form. When I asked Mason who takes care of him, his immediate response was, "My dad. He found me." When I asked how that made him feel, he said, "Like the story about the spider. Somebody finally saw me." And his attachment to his father? After only 2 days? Attachment isn't measured in days, Miss Garrison. It's measured in safety. Mason has never experienced safety with an adult before. The speed of his attachment to Jace isn't unusual. It's desperate. This child is reaching for the first person who has ever made him feel protected, and pulling him away from that connection now would cause catastrophic psychological harm. Crane cross-examined. Dr. Whitfield, isn't it possible that a child in Mason's condition would attach to any adult who showed him kindness? That this attachment is not specific to Mr. Garrison, but is a trauma response? It's possible in theory, but Mason's drawing tells a different story. He didn't draw the nurses who were kind to him. He didn't draw Dr. Lou, who treated him gently. He drew his father, his grandfather, and his mother. He drew a family. He drew the people he belongs to. Then came Agent Dan Coulter. Harper hadn't told Jace what was coming. She hadn't told anyone, because what Coulter carried into that courtroom changed everything. Agent Coulter, you are the lead investigator on a federal case involving Wade Puckett. Can you describe the scope of that investigation? The investigation began 18 months ago as a regional methamphetamine trafficking case. Wade Puckett was identified as a mid-level producer and distributor within a network controlled by Victor Stokes. Over the course of the investigation, we discovered that the network's activities extended beyond drug production. Extended how? Victor Stokes' organization has been using drug distribution routes as cover for the trafficking of minors. Children between the ages of 4 and 12 were being transported through a series of safe houses, including Wade Puckett's trailer on County Road 14, to buyers in 4 states. The courtroom erupted. Harlow gavelled for silence. Crane was on his feet. Your Honor, this testimony has no bearing on the custody. Sit down, Mr. Crane. Agent Coulter, continue. This morning, a 47-count federal indictment against Victor Stokes was unsealed. The charges include RICO violations, drug trafficking, money laundering, and 3 counts of conspiracy to traffic minors across state lines. Harper turned to the gallery. Agent Coulter, is Victor Stokes present in this courtroom? He is. 3rd row, gray suit. Every head turned. Victor Stokes, 61, silver temples, tailored suit, the kind of man who looked like he belonged on a board of directors, sat frozen. His face drained of color. The courtroom doors opened. 4 FBI agents walked in. 2 moved to the 3rd row. Victor Stokes, you're under arrest. Please stand and place your hands behind your back. Stokes stood. His attorney grabbed his arm. Stokes shook him off. The cuffs went on with a click that echoed through the silent courtroom. As agents led him toward the door, Stokes passed Crane's table. His attorney was already closing his briefcase. Mr. Crane, Harlow said, does your client wish to continue? Crane looked at the empty seat where his benefactor had been sitting 30 seconds ago, looked at the FBI agents, looked at Harper Garrison, who hadn't moved, hadn't smiled, hadn't flinched. No further arguments, Your Honor. Good choice. Mr. Garrison, approach the bench. Jay stood. His legs felt hollow. His hands were shaking. He walked to the front of the courtroom and stood before Judge Harlow. And everything he'd prepared, every argument Harper had coached him on, every legal phrase, every polished statement, dissolved. Your Honor, I don't have a speech. My sister's the one with the words. I'm just a man who's been looking for his son for 6 years. Tell me why you should have custody of this child. Because he's my son. And I'm his father. I know my record. I know it doesn't look good. I know my life doesn't fit in a box the system finds comfortable. But I've spent 6 years tearing apart 3 states looking for that boy. I wasn't there for his first word. I wasn't there for his first step. I wasn't there for his first day of school, because he never had a first day of school. Because the system that's supposed to protect children put him in a house with a man who burned him with cigarettes and locked him in a closet and didn't feed him. Jace's voice cracked. He didn't fix it. I failed him. I live with that. But I'm here now, and that boy deserves a father who'll make him pancakes and read him books and stay up all night when the nightmares come. I can be that. Not because I'm perfect, because I'm his, and he's mine. And nothing in the world matters more than that. Harlow studied him for a long time. Then she spoke to the bailiff. Bring up the video conference. I'd like to speak with Mason. Mason appeared on the screen. He was in a room at the courthouse with a social worker. His bruised face filled the monitor. His good eyes stared directly into the camera. Hello, Mason. I'm Judge Harlow. Can you hear me? Yes, ma'am. I'm going to ask you some questions. You just tell me the truth, okay? Nobody's going to be mad at you for anything you say. Okay. Can you tell me about your dad? He's big. He has a motorcycle. He cried when he held me. Is that good, that he cried? Mason thought about it. Wade never cried. Wade just hit. People who cry feel things. People who feel things don't burn you. Harlow's pen stopped moving. Do you want to live with your dad, Mason? Yes, ma'am. Can you tell me why? Because he was already looking for me. For 6 whole years. That's my whole life. He was looking for my whole life. Is there anything else you want to tell me? Mason was quiet. His hand went to his wrist, the one with the burns. He traced the scars with his finger. Then he looked into the camera. My mama used to tell me that someday somebody would come for me. I thought she was just saying that to make me feel better. But she wasn't. She was telling the truth. My dad came, and my grandpa, and Aunt Harper, and all those people in the leather jackets who stood in the hallway so the sheriff couldn't take me. His voice broke. Nobody ever stood in a hallway for me before. Nobody ever stood anywhere for me. And now there's a whole bunch of people who won't sit down until I'm safe. I don't know what I did to deserve that, but I'd like to stay with them, if that's okay. Harlow turned off the monitor. The courtroom was silent. Crane stared at his empty briefcase. Harper had tears on her face and didn't bother hiding them. Jay stood with his hands at his sides and his heart outside his body. Harlow spoke. I've been on this bench for 22 years. I've heard every kind of argument. I've seen parents fight and lie and perform for custody of children they barely know. This is not that. She paused. Emergency temporary custody of Mason Reed is granted to Jace Garrison. Effective immediately. This child is going home. Mason didn't wait. He burst through the door of the conference room, ran down the corridor, shoved through the courtroom doors, climbed over the gallery railing, all 39 pounds of him, and launched himself at Jace. Jace caught him, lifted him, crushed him against his chest. We did it, buddy. We're going home. For real? Forever? Forever. You promise? I promise. Outside the courthouse, 49 Hells Angels stood in formation, silent, still. When Jace walked out carrying Mason, not one of them cheered. They stood like soldiers at attention, hands at their sides, faces forward, honoring something sacred. Then Roach Dillard's chin trembled, his jaw clenched, his eyes filled, and the biggest, hardest, least sentimental man in the entire chapter broke down crying in broad daylight on the courthouse steps. One by one, every rider followed, 49 men and women in leather and denim, standing on the steps of the Nashville courthouse, weeping. Mason, perched on his father's hip, looked at the sea of faces. Dad, are they all crying? Yeah, buddy, Why? Because you're coming home, and that makes them happy. Mason considered this. The impossible math of tears and happiness existing in the same moment. The alien concept of people weeping not because something hurt, but because something was finally, impossibly right. That's a lot of people, Dad. That's your family, Mason. And Mason Reed, 6 years old, 39 pounds, covered in scars that would never fully disappear, smiled. Not the ghost smile from the hospital, not the careful, calculated curve of a mouth that had learned to perform safety. A real smile, wide and crooked and full of something that had been beaten and burned and starved and locked in a closet for 6 years, but had refused, absolutely refused, to die. The first real smile of his life. The first night in the farmhouse, Mason didn't sleep in the bedroom Jace had prepared for him. He slept on the floor beside Jace's bed, curled in a blanket, his back pressed against the wall. Old habits. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget. Jace found him at 2 a.m., not because Mason made a sound, but because Jace hadn't slept either. He'd been lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to his son breathe, terrified that if he closed his eyes, the boy would be gone when he opened them. He got up, saw Mason on the floor, didn't say a word, just pulled a pillow off the bed, grabbed a blanket, and lay down on the floor next to him. Mason's eyes opened. What are you doing? If you're sleeping on the floor, I'm sleeping on the floor. You don't have to do that. I know. The bed's right there. I see it. Mason was quiet. Then he shifted, just an inch, closer to Jace. His small hand found the edge of his father's sleeve and held on. Dad? Yeah, buddy. At Wade's, I used to sleep on the floor in the closet. I'd press my back against the wall because that way, nobody could come up behind me. You don't need a wall behind you anymore, Mason. You've got me. That's what I'm starting to think. They slept on the floor for the first week. By the second week, Mason moved to the bed, but only if Jace sat in the chair beside it until he fell asleep. By the third week, Mason fell asleep on his own for the first time. He woke up screaming at 4 a.m., and Jace was there in 6 seconds flat, sitting on the edge of the bed, not touching, just present. Bad dream? Wade was at the door. He had a key. There's no key, buddy. There's no door. There's no Wade. Just me. I know. My brain knows. My body doesn't yet. That's okay. Bodies take longer. We'll wait. 3 months changed everything and nothing at the same time. Mason still checked every lock in the house before bed. A ritual Jace didn't try to stop because Dr. Whitfield said the boy needed to feel agency over his own safety. Still flinched when Jace moved too fast. Still ate like someone might steal his plate. Hunched over, arms guarding the edges, until Dwight gently told him the kitchen wasn't going anywhere and neither was the food. But he laughed now. Not often, not easily. The sound came out rusty at first, like a machine that hadn't been turned on in years and wasn't sure it still worked. But it was there. In the farmhouse where laughter hadn't lived for years, it was there. Dwight moved in. Nobody discussed it. Nobody voted. He just showed up one morning with a suitcase in his griddle and said, "I'm taking the downstairs bedroom. Don't argue with me." "Dad, I wasn't going to." "Good. I'm also buying a dog." "We don't need a..." "Not for you, for Mason." Roach was the one who handled that. 3 days later, he showed up at the farmhouse with a mutt in his arms. Scrawny, torn ear, 3 legs, shaking like a leaf in a storm. Mason dropped to his knees. "That's my dog. From behind the family dollar. How did you find him?" "I've got connections," Roach said, which was the most Roach had ever said about anything emotional. Mason held the dog against his chest. The mutt licked his face. The boy buried his nose in the dog's fur and didn't move for 5 minutes. "What's his name?" Jace asked. "Sergeant," Mason said without hesitation, "because Roach is the sergeant at arms, and he found him." Roach turned around and walked to his motorcycle very quickly. Jace saw him wipe his face with both hands before putting his helmet on. 2 weeks later, Roach brought a second dog, Sergeant's brother from the same litter, found behind a gas station in Piney Hollow. That one became Dwight's. Dwight named him Private. That's a terrible name, Dad. He's a rank below Sergeant. It's logical. It's ridiculous. Your son laughed for 30 seconds straight when I told him. That makes it a perfect name. Mason's enrollment at Piney Hollow Elementary took 4 hours. Harper handled the paperwork. She discovered that Mason had never been registered for school, never been issued a Social Security card through normal channels, never been entered into any educational database. For 6 years, this child had been invisible. The state failed him at every level, Harper told Jace that night while Mason was upstairs reading with Dwight. No enrollment records, no truancy checks, no welfare visits. He was a ghost. Wade kept him off every grid, and nobody came looking. Not one person? Not one. The system that was supposed to catch this, mandatory school enrollment, welfare checks, mandatory reporting, every single safeguard failed. Every single one. Jace closed his eyes. 6 years. I know. My son was 30 miles from me for 6 years, and nobody, not a teacher, not a social worker, not a neighbor, not a cop, nobody noticed a child was missing from the world. Banning made sure of that. He ran interference. Every potential inquiry was redirected. Every report was buried. Wade's trailer was a black site, and Banning was the gatekeeper. And Mason paid the price. Mason survived the price. There's a difference. The morning of Mason's first day of school, Jace drove him in the truck. Dwight had won that argument weeks ago. You're not dropping a 6-year-old at school on a motorcycle, Jace. It looks cool, Dad. I didn't say it didn't look cool. I said you're not doing it. Mason wore new clothes that fit, sneakers with laces Dwight had taught him to tie, a process that took an hour and involved 4 failed attempts and one moment where Dwight held up his own shoes and said, "I'm 74 and I still get them wrong. You're doing fine." A red backpack with 2 sharpened pencils, a notebook, and a peanut butter sandwich cut into triangles. "Why triangles?" Jace had asked. "Triangles taste better," Mason said. "That's not how sandwiches work." "That's exactly how sandwiches work." Jace didn't argue. He cut the sandwich into triangles. At the school entrance, Mason stopped walking. His hand tightened on Jace's. "Dad, what if nobody likes me? Then they're missing out. What if I'm dumb? You taught yourself to read from a book you found in a dumpster. You performed first aid on a 74-year-old man in a flipped truck when you were 6. You gave testimony that helped the FBI rescue 11 children from a trafficking ring. That's the opposite of dumb, buddy. What if the other kids think I'm weird?" "You are weird. All the best people are." Mason almost smiled. Then the fear came back, fast, flooding, the old survival instincts kicking in. Strange place, strange people, no exits mapped, no closet to hide in. "I'm scared, Dad." "I know. Is that okay? Being scared means you're about to do something brave." Mason took a breath, let go of Jace's hand, took 2 steps toward the door, then spun around and ran back, throwing his arms around Jace's waist with a force that knocked the air out of him. "I love you, Dad." The first time he'd said it to anyone since Crystal died. The words came out cracked and raw and fierce. Not gentle, not soft, but desperate. Like a boy who'd learned that love was a thing that could be taken away at any second was saying it now, fast, before the world changed its mind. Jace's arms wrapped around him, tight. His voice came out wrecked. "I love you too, buddy. More than motorcycles." "That's a lot. That's everything." Mason pulled back, wiped his face, squared his shoulders, a gesture that was pure Jace, pure Crystal, pure something entirely his own, and walked into the school. He didn't look back. Jace sat in the truck for 20 minutes, his hands on the steering wheel, his forehead against his knuckles, crying harder than he had the day Mason was born. The legal cases fell like dominoes. Victor Stokes, convicted on all 47 federal counts, including 3 counts of conspiracy to traffic minors. The evidence was devastating. Mason's testimony about the vans, combined with financial records the FBI had subpoenaed, and the testimony of 3 other rescued children, built a case that Stokes's army of lawyers couldn't dent. Sentencing came in October. Life without parole. He would die in a federal prison. Sheriff Lyle Banning, 18 years. The FBI had traced payments from Stokes's network to Banning's personal accounts going back 7 years. Deputy Gentry testified for the prosecution. So did Deputy Reyes. So did 4 other deputies who'd been waiting years for someone to break the silence first. Banning's empire collapsed in a single afternoon. Deputy Sam Gentry, the 26-year-old who'd unclipped his badge in a hospital corridor, joined the FBI's Victim Services Unit. His first case was helping reunite the 11 children recovered from Stokes's trafficking network with their families. 3 of those children had been missing for over 2 years. Wade Puckett cooperated, named names, dates, routes, buyers, got 15 years federal. Mason didn't react when Jace told him, just nodded and went back to reading Charlotte's Web for the 14th time. "You okay, buddy?" "I thought I'd feel something, happy maybe, or mad." "What do you feel?" "Nothing, like he's just gone. Like he was a bad dream and I woke up." "Is that okay?" "I think so. Dr. Whitfield says I don't have to feel anything I'm not ready to feel." "He's right." "Dad, the other kids, the ones in the vans, are they okay?" "The FBI found 11 of them. They're going home." "Because I talked?" "Because you were brave enough to tell the truth." Mason was quiet. He traced the scars on his wrist, a habit Jace had learned not to stop because the therapist said it was self-soothing, not self-harm. "Good," Mason said. "Somebody should have talked for me, and nobody did. So I talked for them." Judge Harlow granted full permanent custody in November. The hearing lasted 12 minutes, 3-page ruling. Harper read the final line aloud at the farmhouse that evening, while Dwight made chocolate cake and Mason sat on the kitchen counter swinging his legs. The court finds that Jace Garrison has demonstrated extraordinary commitment to his son's welfare. Custody is granted without reservation. "What does without reservation mean?" Mason asked. "It means nobody can take you away," Harper said. "Ever. You're home." "Like legally home?" "Like forever home." Mason looked at Jace, at Dwight, at Harper, at Sergeant the 3-legged dog sprawled across the kitchen floor, at Private snoring on Dwight's boots. "Okay," he said, and smiled, and went back to licking cake batter off a wooden spoon like a boy who'd just been told something he already knew. The Hells Angels threw a party. Not a biker party, a family party. Roach brought his 7-year-old daughter Lily, who walked up to Mason, grabbed his hand without asking, and said, "You're it." Mason stared at her. "I'm what?" "It. We're playing tag. You chase me." "I don't know how to play tag." "You run. You touch someone. They're it. It's not hard." But Lily was already gone, sprinting across the yard with her hair flying. Mason looked at Jace. "Go," Jace said. Mason ran, caught Lily in 10 seconds. She screamed, laughing, tagged him back, and took off again. More kids appeared, Roach's neighbors, club members' grandchildren, kids from the farmhouse down the road. Within 5 minutes, Mason was running and laughing and being 6 in a way no one had ever let him be. Dwight watched from the porch, 4 chocolate cakes on the table behind him. He'd miscounted, and nobody complained. Jace dropped into the chair next to him. "He's playing," Jace said. "Look at him. I see him. He's laughing, Dad. I hear him. I didn't know if he could. I didn't know if they'd taken that from him." Dwight's good hand found Jace's shoulder. "They didn't take it. They buried it. And you dug it back up." That night, Jace found Mason in his bedroom. The boy was sitting on the edge of the bed, holding the photograph, complete now, untorn, Crystal and Jace standing beside the Harley with Tennessee Hills behind them. He'd taped it to the wall above his pillow, the first thing he'd see every morning. "You miss her?" Jace asked from the doorway. "Every day. Is that okay?" Missing someone means they mattered. She mattered. Jace sat beside him. Mason leaned into his side without flinching. 3 months ago, that contact would have made him rigid. Now his body softened, trusted, rested. "Dad, do you think Mama knows I found you?" "I think she's been watching the whole time. Because I saved Grandpa Chief? Because you stopped. On that road, carrying stolen stew cans with burns on your arms and nothing in your stomach. You heard someone calling for help, and you stopped. Every person in this world walked past you for 6 years, Mason. Teachers who should have noticed. Neighbors who should have asked. A whole system that should have caught you. They all kept walking, and the first chance you got to be like them, to walk past someone who needed help, you didn't. I couldn't walk past him, Dad. He sounded scared, like Mama used to sound on her good days. Scared and reaching out in the dark. That's not weakness, buddy. What is it? It's the strongest thing there is. Choosing to love people when the world's given you every reason not to." Mason yawned, climbed under the covers. Sargent jumped onto the bed, circled twice, and collapsed against Mason's legs. The boy's hand found the dog's ear and rubbed it the way he always did. Gently, slowly, like he was still amazed that something alive would choose to stay close to him. "Dad, will you read me the spider book?" Jace picked up Charlotte's Web, the same battered copy Mason had carried through a life no child should have survived. Spine cracked, pages water-stained, cover held together with tape. Mason had read it 11 times alone in the dark. Now he was hearing it read aloud by his father in a warm room with a dog at his feet and a grandfather downstairs arguing with a second dog about who got the last piece of cake. Mason's eyes closed before Charlotte even appeared. His hand relaxed on the blanket, palm up, the cigarette burn scars fading to white circles that would never disappear, but would someday be just marks instead of maps. Jace kissed his forehead, stood in the doorway watching the rise and fall of that small chest, then walked out to the porch where Dwight was sitting with Private at his feet. "He asleep?" "Before the spider even showed up," Dwight smiled. "His mother used to fall asleep during that book too." They sat together, father and son. The sky was full of stars and the farmhouse was full of something that hadn't lived there in years. Something warm and imperfect and real. Not the absence of pain, not the end of nightmares, just the beginning of something that a barefoot boy on a back road had set in motion when he chose to stop instead of walk past. A boy stopped on the side of a road because he heard someone calling for help. He didn't know the man was the patriarch of the Hells Angels. Didn't know the man was his own grandfather. Didn't know that 26 minutes of holding a stranger's hand would dismantle a drug empire, expose a corrupt sheriff, rescue 11 children, and reunite a father and son who'd been separated since birth. He just knew someone was hurt, and he could help. And walking past was not something he was willing to do. That's not a story about bikers or courtrooms or corrupt cops. That's a story about a boy who chose love when the world taught him nothing but pain. A boy who saved a stranger because saving people was who he was, not despite what he'd been through, but because of it. And sometimes, one good kid is all it takes to change everything.